Hello y'all, this is Prime 3285, and I just want to talk about the history of the Sega Genesis console. Now, the Sega Genesis came out in 1989 in North America. It was a great console, had a lot of great titles, such as Sonic the Hedgehog, Golden Axe, Streets of Rage, and many more. This was a great console. It was a 16-bit game console. It was huge, a lot of people that, that had, was a lot of people around this time that had a Sega Genesis, especially in the 90s, like around 91 and 92 or 93. Throughout the 90s, people had, a lot of people you probably know of had a Sega Genesis around that time, and the Sega Genesis was going head to head with the Super Nintendo around the 90s, the mid-90s. I think around like 91, and had a lot of great titles like Sonic the Hedgehog, Sonic the Hedgehog 2, Sonic the Hedgehog 3, Sonic and Knuckles, Streets of Rage 2, Streets of Rage 3, the Golden Axe series like Golden Axe 2, Golden Axe 3, Vector Man, Mortal Kombat, games like Mortal Kombat, Street Fighter 2, it was going head to head with the Super Nintendo, and it was a great console. It was definitely a great console. You had your Sega Genesis fans and you had your Super Nintendo fans. And I was a big fan of both, but I really loved the Genesis. The Genesis was definitely one of my all-time favorites. I love the design, I like how the system was black, and it had the 16-bit. It also had a part in the system where you could plug your headset up to, like a port, where you could plug your headphones up to, which was really cool. But it also had different versions. It had a smaller version, slimmer version. It also had a handheld called the Game Gear, Sega Game Gear. It also featured, the Sega Genesis also featured the Mega Drive, the Sega Genesis, and it had a lot of great titles, a lot of great games came out with it. It had a lot of great games like X-Men 2, Madden, it had a lot of games, a lot of sports games. It had a lot of great games like Sonic Pinball, Vector Man, had a lot of great titles. Had a whole lot of great titles. Ghostbusters, had a lot of great titles. Like Street Fighter 2, Mortal Kombat 2, Mortal Kombat 3, people that had a Sega Genesis, they had a blast playing it because, me, I had a Genesis too, and I remember me and my brother and my sister, we used to always play it back in the day. We used to always play the Sega Genesis. We playing Streets of Rage, Sonic the Hedgehog, Sonic 2, the system was, in my opinion, it was one of the all-time greats. It was a true great console, and it was just had a lot of great titles, a lot of great games, and they even had newer systems, like later down the line, newer versions of the system. I'm gonna talk about that in a little bit, but like games like Golden Axe, like beat 'em ups like Golden Axe and Streets of Rage, those games were amazing. Sega had a lot of great games, like Golden Axe 2, and it was ahead of its time. It was a great system. Sonic the Hedgehog was very popular. This was the first system that featured Sonic the Hedgehog. And it was the third system, Sega Genesis. It was actually the third version. It was the third Sega system. It came out in 1989. Featured a lot of great titles. And I just love doing a video about the classic systems because I just remember being a kid, coming home playing it, non-stop, playing a lot of great games. Street Fighter 2 Championship Edition, Ghostbusters, Mortal Kombat. Like I remember Mortal Kombat 1, the first Mortal Kombat game had button codes. Now, I think Mortal Kombat 1 for the Sega Genesis actually had some blood in it, which was cool. I think in the Super Nintendo version it didn't have any blood in it. Then it also was followed by Mortal Kombat 2 and Mortal Kombat 3. It also had games like Virtual Fighter 2 that came out later down the line. Streets of Rage 3. In my last video I talked about Streets of Rage. But around the time when Streets of Rage 3 came out, that's when they were starting to rate games. I think it was around 95. They were starting to rate games. 95, 96. And it featured a lot of great games, including Sonic the Hedgehog. Sonic the Hedgehog was one of my favorites. And it was followed by many sequels. And it became a huge phenomenon, Sega is definitely one of my favorite companies that, video game companies that I will never forget to this day. And I sure hope one day that they make a comeback, And this system, the system was also inspired by other systems later down the line, like the Sega Dreamcast and Sega Saturn, Sega Dreamcast, This was, this was, one of the very best systems in my opinion. One of my favorite Sega systems of all time, It also featured different versions, of the system, and it had a handheld called Sega Game Gear, had a slimmer version of the system, Also, they also had like a Sega 3, which I don't know if anybody remember that. They had a Sega Genesis 3, Also, this system featured the Sega Mega Drive. I think it gave it a little more graphics, But, later, after this system, you had the Sega CD, and, you also had the Sega Saturn. It was followed by the Sega Saturn, and then the Sega Dreamcast, and this is the Game Gear. I think it sold a lot. It was a great handheld. I think it also had color, the Game Gear, the Sega Game Gear, I think the problem with the handheld, if I can remember, the batteries used to drain quickly because of the color or something like that. The batteries used to drain quickly. I remember with the Sega Game Gear handheld. But it was, it also featured different versions, like the Sega Genesis Classic console. That had 80 built-in games, and it had wireless remotes, It took batteries, but it was followed by, systems like they have now for the Sega Genesis. They made newer versions of the system that you can get. It has built-in games. It even has a handheld Sega Genesis, a handheld that has built-in games, and it had different versions of, and what was cool about these newer versions of the system, the Sega Genesis, the newer systems, is that it was also you could also use old Sega Genesis cartridges with it. You could also use like old Sega Genesis cartridges. It was compatible with Sega Genesis cartridges. It was also compatible with the old Sega Genesis remotes with the cords you could plug into the ports, and that's really cool. It was also followed by the Sega Genesis the classic Sega Genesis console, which was a HD. It was an HD version of it, Now that version of the console looks more like the old school Sega Genesis console, but it's in HD, and the games sound better, like the quality is better, you know. But I love playing the Sega Genesis, you know. You had Golden Axe, Golden Axe 2, Golden Axe 3, you know, the Streets of Rage games. I love playing those games. Still to this very day, I love playing, you know, like the Sega Genesis games, you know. It's really cool. And I want to know more about, from, you know, about y'all, you know, my subscribers, y'all experiences with the Sega Genesis. What were your favorite games, you know? What were your all-time favorites? You know, was it Sonic the Hedgehog? Was it Golden Axe? Was it the X-Men games? You know, I want to know, what was your favorite Sega Genesis console of all time? You know, your favorite games. I personally enjoyed the Sega Genesis. You know, I'm a huge Sega fan. You know, a huge Sega fan. You know, what was cool about the Sega Genesis is that you can, you know, it was really cool is that you could plug in your headphones to the console, to the first console. I think the first version, you can plug your headphones up to it and listen to the music, you know. And also, it had a lot of classic games, you know, a lot of games people love to this day, you know, and remember, you know. And I will never forget playing this console. I had a ball, you know, with this console, with the Sega Genesis, and I will never forget it, you know. It came out in 1989, and it was going strong for, you know, throughout the 90s, and it went head to head with the Super Nintendo, you know. And I think the Super Nintendo was also 16-bit. I want to talk more about that in another video. But this video on this, you know, the Sega Genesis, you know, this game has so many games, you know. It has so many great games, so many great titles like Sonic and Knuckles, you know, and so many great games. And I just want to make this video about the history of the Sega Genesis, you know. 16-bit console.